Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, I'm Brian Andrews.
And I'm Jeff Wilson. Together, we're Andrews and Wilson, and you're watching The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Oh, yeah. And the dogs come out, right?
And the dogs come out. I love it.
Who brought the dogs out? Hey, fellas, you've been on the show a bunch of times. And every time you have a new book, you come on, and I love that. Dark Intercept is the new book. Everybody's check it out. You can see it behind both Jeff and Brian, the team of Brian and Andrews who write action thrillers. I guess let's just do the elevator pitch on the book. It's a new series. Tell us about it, and then let's go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dark Intercept, this is the very first book in a new series called The Shepherds that we've launched with Tyndale House. And this is a new adventure for us. It's slightly different. We actually been telling people it's not that different. We just added a layer. So the one thing that's a little bit unique to this series compared to our other action thriller series like Tier 1 and Sons of Valor is that we do have this thread of a faith element that pulls through this, involving things like crisis and faith that you see commonly after wartime service, and some supernatural elements of spiritual warfare that were really, really fun for us to play with. So this is a pretty classic Andrews and Wilson action-packed covert ops story, other than weaving those elements through as well.
So whose idea was this to bring in these other elements, like these depth of character elements?
Well, our publisher likes to say that this book is like Taken meets Stranger Things. And so I like that. It kind of does encapsulate, like Jeff said, it's not a divergent from what we've done before, but it does have these additional layers. So we have, Sarah Beth, who is a 12-year-old point of view character. That's the first time we've written in, a young person's point of view. And like you said, like you hinted at there, Pete, the supernatural element. So Jeff dabbled writing horror and supernatural thrillers before, and I've always been really big into science fiction sort of as a interest, so we've kind of played around with some of these threads a little bit individually, and it just felt like a natural fit for us to incorporate them into this story. And we had a lot of fun doing it too.
Yeah, it sounds fun. It's interesting. You think about these other characters. We've had Jeffrey Reddick on the show before. He wrote those stories where death is a character, Final Destination. And so there's death, and it's the protagonist or the antagonist, depending on how you look at it. Is that sort of what we're going to experience with this thriller novel?
Yeah. So, you asked, where did the idea come from? It came, Brian and I, as you know, are best friends as well as business partners and co-authors. And so we spend a lot of time socially talking about stuff, right? Talking about faith and family and philosophy and all kinds of different things. And this whole idea of, good versus evil, it actually stemmed from a conversation. I can't remember what we were originally talking about, something with war. And I remember Brian got this weird look on his face. I want to ask you a question. Like, have you ever experienced feeling like you're in the presence of pure evil? And he had that kid grin he gets that I love so much. And I was like, honestly, I do. Overseas during a deployment, I can tell you there have been times where I felt like, this is beyond just bad people. This is what I'm experiencing here. This is real evil. And so the idea of running that thread of good versus evil into a book, what does that mean? What is good? What is evil? How do those forces play out in the lives of ordinary men and women? That little discussion one evening, that sort of was the launching point for this idea. And, Pete, we always start with that what if question we talked about before. Here we were like, what if there really are good and evil forces, this idea of good and evil from a biblical standpoint? What if those things are out there? Wouldn't there be a response? Wouldn't there be an organization, an Andrews and Wilson style covert operations team working behind the scenes in the shadows combating that evil, both in the physical world as special operations and maybe in the spiritual warfare world. So those little conversations were sort of where this bore out. So we don't have evil as a character, the devil as a character exactly, but the idea of good versus evil and how it affects man and the choices that we make when confronted with those things was really a part of the book for sure.
Any good military thriller has this good and evil battle. So yeah, I love that you guys are expanding upon what that means. I think that's a great way to push a story out of the norm and everything. How do you deal with the fact that good and evil is highly perspective driven? You know, we flip that camera around the other direction and, you know, Abu bad guy is, you know,
yeah,
it's
you know,
just about.
You've read like our Sons of Valor, series, and that's something that we took great pride in with Tier 1 and Sons of Valor is that we really try to put you into the shoes of the antagonist, walk a mile in the antagonist's shoes, maybe get some perspective on how he or she ended up in the place that they are. And so we always like to do that. And you're embedded in these antagonists' lives longitudinally as the series advances. But I think what's like what Jeff was saying is the pivot here is that, yes, we don't have death personified, but we do have sort of evil personified in this organization that Jed finds himself up against. You know, it's much bigger than just one person. And I think that that's what's so terrifying is that, yeah, there are these evil actors out there, but there's not just a human pulling the strings, right? There's this malevolent, depraved force that you really can't sympathize with in any way. I mean, there's no redeeming qualities to the evil that Jed is up against, and Jed's the main character in this story. So for us, it does make it a little bit easier to hate the bad guys in this story than it does in like Sons of Valor, for example.
But in order to do that same thing, like Brian is saying, you know, in our other series, we do try to show you the human side. You know, we've talked with you extensively about this, both in the real world and in fiction. The bad guys are the good guys in their frame of reference, right? And so we've always painted that. And like Brian is saying, you can't really paint the evil force here as anything but the evil force. So what we did instead was we do have a few characters in the book, and it's hard to get too much detail without spoiling anything, but there's a few characters in the book that you'll see in the arc of the first 3 books where, yeah, they're in the bad guy camp, but you do have a bit of sympathy for how they got there, the choices that they made, the feeling of helplessness that, you know, maybe God isn't there for me because of these circumstances in my life, so I'm just going to choose the other camp. That was a challenge, I think, because we did want to find that balance like we found in the other books.
Some of these, so I've spoken to evil face to face. That was part of my job, right, when I was doing the counterintelligence thing. And you have to find the evil people because they are your protagonist in real life, or antagonist, depending on how you look at it. Once again, so you go out and you find that guy and you're talking to him, and they've killed babies on command and become used to killing babies and women and anybody else, and they're beyond a thug. They really are evil, and there's no going back. There's no Darth Vader moment where they're saved. But these people exist.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear, did you ever feel like, Pete, in the interrogations or the conversations that you had, were there some that you felt like had lost their soul, you know, just didn't have a soul, or some that were sort of hanging on to the edge and maybe you saw some humanity in their eyes? Or was it, I'd like to hear more about that. Yeah,
no worries. Glad to explain it. Yeah, and just so the audience understands, I'm not an interrogator. I'm a counterintelligence agent, right? So I'm a spy. I'm trying to create relationships, and so I have to find the humanity in that person. Yeah. I have to find those things, because if I don't connect with them, I'm not going to survive, right? I need everybody to know that I'm on their side, and I have to be genuine. So I'm looking for points of trust and ways to, like when people say build rapport, there's a design in the rapport that I build, so that I know that it's there. Because if that guy who's evil personified said, hey, let's get in my car and let's go to my house, I want to feed you some fish, I need to figure out how to say yes to that, right? But I can't say yes to that if I haven't done the work ahead of time and accept that person for who they are. So I don't have to agree with it, but I do have to listen to their stories. So I for sure have talked to people who do not regard life in the way that any sane, normal person regards life. And yet they still love people. And so I'm sort of on this line of how do I protect myself? How do I go out and find information nobody else can find out, while talking to people that are the worst possible people that I can find? And I don't, that's not really an answer to your question, I guess, but it's just a contextualized difference in how I have to approach it, because I'm trying to balance the equation between the military and then the other side. And that means that I've got these free radicals that I'm forced to deal with, because they have the good information that we all need to balance the scale.
But I think that's actually a really good answer to the question, Pete. It answers the question perfectly, because it by implication shows that no matter how bad the actors are and the things they've done are bad, there is this other redeemable human side to them, right? They love their kids. They love their wife. And there are some people that don't even have that. Look, I've experienced those people, and I know you have too. People that you're like, they don't love anyone. They don't love the kids. They don't have their own kid. They are pure evil. They're beyond redemption. There's nothing there. But there are those others that have that human side. And what we tried to do here that was kind of different was, here's the question we pose. Let me see what you think of this, because you're our philosopher. We love to hear from you on these kinds of things, right? So, Is it possible that if these evil forces exist, is it possible that everything we've seen over the last few generations that we call evil man is actually being driven by something else? Like, is Adolf Hitler in World War II and the destruction of millions and millions of communities and people, is Osama bin Laden, is this call for jihad and these things that we see, horrible things done in the name of these people? Could there be some evil force behind, whispering in the ears of just the right people to put them on a path to create a world so full of evil that it makes good people doubt their faith? That good people go, there can't be a God that would allow an Adolf Hitler or a bin Laden or a Haqqani network that cuts babies in half. And there can't be a God that would allow that to happen. And if you were that evil force, if we want to call it Satan or the devil or whatever, but if there's this evil force, wouldn't that be a brilliant way to subvert the goodness in the world? To simply put that doubt by creating circumstances so full of evil through weak people that you can make people say, wow, I give up on this God thing. There is no good. There is no God. There's just us and them. Wouldn't that be a brilliant tool to use? And so we do have that thread that we tried to pull through here. But in its heart, it's still men versus men, right? No matter what forces you've chosen to ally yourself with, at some point, you've got to kid up and go out and do the hard work, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan, throughout the world, or if it's in our fictitious world that we created in the Shepherd series, all over the world where these forces are fighting one another through man. So it was fun. I got to tell you, it was a lot of fun to be able to get a little outside of our normal box and bring those elements in. Yeah, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things you just brought up. If I'm working at the peak level as a counterintelligence agent, I'm looking for people that I can turn into double and triple agents, right? I'm trying to find people that their moral compass is so spun around that I can control it on my end, right? That's really what I'm looking for. And they're looking for the same thing. They're looking for that exploitable military age male that doesn't have a future, thinks that they can maybe help their family by doing this one awful act or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're all competing for these things. And faith for sure is part of the equation. You have to deal with it. You might just exit out when you're deployed. There is no faith here. There's only war, and war is the God. But I used to train spies, right? And we would go out and have to do counterintelligence, force protection, source operations, which sounds like a mouthful, but really it's just doing our job. And we had a Mormon reservist who had problems smoking and drinking on the job. And but there's no room for that part of God here, right? Like, you have to deal with the fact that if you don't do this and a bomb rolls in the door, it's you. That's your job. You're one of the main people at keeping these things from happening or alerting us.
And so you have to decide what God wants you to do. I'm not going to tell you that, but that faith part, Jeff, it's a huge, you have to reconcile that. And part of your soul has to be traded to protect other people. I mean, you've got to be willing to do it. Maybe you can protect your soul in other ways, but there is a reckoning that comes with that.
You know, when I was listening to you, I was thinking about, when Jeff was talking, just thinking about, you know, what if you look at evil as using like a virus metaphor? We've even talked, you know, we've all been through this pandemic, you know, can you get infected by it? And is there a way to inoculate yourself from evil, you know, and it sort of does spread like that. You know, when you get exposed to it, when you're in this environment where you're surrounded by it, immersed in it, I think it's hard not for it to seep in. And that's probably what happens to a lot of folks is that you start to become infected by it, and you have to find a way to purge it out of your body and reset that moral compass, because we all can drift, and maybe we're drifting so slowly that we're not aware of it.
Yeah, another way to think of it, Brian, is instead of looking at it as a treatment for the infection, I like you use the word inoculation like a vaccine, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into anything controversial here, but is there a way to vaccinate yourself against that evil so you never get that infection? And we talk about that a little bit in the book, not directly, not in these terms, but this whole idea of preparing yourself for battle with these dark forces. You know, there's scripture that talks about putting on the armor of God. Well, what does that mean? You know, the armor of God is not your kit and your plate carrier and your extra magazines and your SOPMOD M4. The armor of God is something more spiritual. It's, you know, understanding your purpose. It's understanding what God has for you in that situation. And so we have this character, Jedidiah Johnson, who is he's a very different character. We'll get into that maybe, but he's a very different character for us in some ways. But one thing that is unique to him is that he brings with him this fractured past where he was a young man of faith who actually wanted to go into ministry, wanted to be a pastor and all this. And he confronted real evil as a young man in high school. Mm-hmm. And he had the opposite effect of what you want your heroes to have, right? He ran away. He ran away from his home, from his girlfriend, from his family, from, you know, the ministry, from his faith. And he found his way to the military, wound up becoming a Navy SEAL and operated as an operator. He was at the top of his game, but he was still a broken man because he had run from these things, right? What is the way to inoculate yourself from that? How do you prepare yourself to face evil, especially in the military? If you're going to these places where there's some evil shit out there, how do you arm yourself? What does that mean to put on the armor of God to protect yourself? And so that's something that our character, Jedidiah Johnson, needs to learn in the arc of the book. He has to confront this past, these mistakes and these regrets. But more importantly, he has to learn from it to protect himself and prepare himself for what lies ahead so that he can save this young, innocent girl who has been captured and is in real danger, both physically and spiritually. So it's a really cool thing to be able to, you know, we've talked with you about these things, but to put them in a book and keep that action element, that was a challenge, but it was super fun, really fun.
Yeah, it's neat. And then I guess you can continue to crack this, right, as you go along, because faith is often a struggle. I mean, part of the reason why you run from it is because you don't think you're prepared for it. And look, we got people running from inoculations right now, right, that are terrified. And at some point, they get brought towards a decision point. And then that also brings out the philosopher in me. And I wonder, you know, our two big competing faiths are Christianity and Islam, right? And there's no derogatory anything in any of this. This is just like these are competing ideals. And at their core, Christianity is based on faith. And Islam is based on surrender. You have to surrender to God's will, right? Whereas we look at on the Christian side of it, you know, you have to believe in God's love, as an example, right? And so what if you're wired to be more of a surrenderer than a person of faith, and you don't know that, and your part of your struggle is to find your spiritual home, and it doesn't have to be in the Islam dojo; it can be somewhere else. But that also is part of it, to find that that the right kind of inoculation for the person you are, you know, to get epigenetical about it and whatnot.
No, but that's right. It's personal, right? It's and that's the difference between faith and religion. I think. The people that get in trouble are the people that try to find the right religion. Religion is a man-made construct. We take what we believe and then we build this enormous institution around it. But at its heart, faith is about relationship, right? It's about forming a relationship with God. It's about forming a relationship with fellow believers based on a philosophy, based on a belief, but it's relationship based rather than rules and institution based. And so one way you can separate yourself from the horror that is making those decisions of aligning yourself with a camp is to take the camp out of the equation altogether, get on your knees and figure out, what do I believe, and be in relationship. And then it is a form of surrender too, right? On the Christian side, you have to surrender to that belief and to that relationship. So I think that's where we get in trouble as men, is we institutionalize it. We take a God, we put him in a box, and we create our own bizarro world institution around him. And he's the whole time in the box going, wait a minute, I just want to be your friend. I just want to hang out with you. I didn't want all this. And so, and then you see what's been done in the name of God throughout the history of mankind. None of that was God. That's us. That's us jacking it up, right? Don't you think?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I do think, but I think there's more there too, because, and I'm going to absolutely screw up the Yazidi faith, but they are looked at as being like devil worshippers, right? And what they see is that Satan is not a fallen angel, but someone who fell, had a fight, they had to sort things out. And God's like, listen, I'm all forgiving, all loving. You're back in the family again. And here is your job, because I'm a big old softy. I just want everybody to, have love and, plenty of fruit on the tree, but I need some contention. I need people to have to walk this walk. And so I need you to go cut babies in half or whatever. Right. And so you need this, it's the yin to God's yang in a lot of ways. And so we need this character. Yeah.
I think that people strive for purpose. And I think that, the scenario you're describing is, when you have charisma, you can be a messed up leader, but if you have charisma and you're giving people some tools to empower themselves or feel empowered and have some purpose, even if that purpose is maniacal, there are some people that are going to lap that up. And that's what they need, And I think, Jeff and I sort of, when we approach these stories, I don't know how much is intentional, but there certainly is the zeitgeist, that goes into, is this a book for the times? And I feel like you look at, we're in the age of the pandemic, the age of misinformation, disinformation, the age of, conflict and despair, and if you're in a position where you don't know what the truth is, you're feeling helpless, you're feeling lack of hope, that's when evil can creep in, right? Despair, take away hope, misinformation, what is truth, lack of purpose, then you become very vulnerable. And like Jeff said, our character Jed realizes, I need to find my purpose. And if you have purpose, then you can stand up against these forces. You have this candle that you can navigate the dark. Without purpose, it's pretty tough.
Yeah. I think purpose is one of the things that us veterans, that we need post-service, so that we can have that candle on in the dark room. Otherwise, it gets awfully dark and terrifying without, I like to promote, like Save the Brave and being in service of others. If you go out and you bend your back and you work hard and you do some charity in a hard way, the Team Rubicon guys are another great example. Go swing a chainsaw out in a place that's been ravaged by a tsunami or a hurricane, and it's a little hard to feel sorry for yourself. You're too damn busy trying to make the world a slightly better, a less crappy place than it was 5 minutes before you got there.
That's right. That's right. And it's Rubicon's a good example. Chad Robishaw's organization, Mighty Oaks, same exact thing. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of them. I'm going to forget some and I'll feel bad later. But there's a number of organizations that realize that struggling veterans after transition to civilian life, one of the things, like you're alluding to, that really makes them struggle is that not just lack of purpose, but lack of camaraderie, lack of, in the military and in the paramilitary organizations, there's a camaraderie of shared purpose, of mission and team before self that just simply can't be replicated in the civilian world not to that level, but it can be found there. And so what Mighty Oak, what Rubicon does, what those organizations do is they try to ease that transition by giving that purpose. And so they do, for Chad's group, Mighty Oaks, they do actual mission work. Like they go and, like you're saying, swing an axe, work a chainsaw, build a house, help people after a disaster. And what they find is that gets those guys, like you're saying, to that point where they find themselves again. They find themselves in that purpose, and now they're ready for that transition. And so that transition from military to civilian is abrupt, especially in wartime. It's abrupt and jarring and disorienting. And one of the things we tried so hard, as you know, to do with our brand is to reach out to people like that. There's not a lot we can do as writers, but we can connect people. We can be a community for people, and we can help them realize that when you leave the military, you didn't leave your team, because guess what? They're out there still. They've left the military. They're running a small business, or they're in medical school going to become a doctor, or they're in business school. They're out there doing some of the things that you want to do, and you can connect with those people, and we can lift each other up. We can mentor each other, and we can form a network of support and find that shared purpose and community again. And right now, with everything that's going on, and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, a lot of Afghanistan veterans are feeling like, what was it all for? Now more than ever, that's what we need. We need to be in community with each other and lift each other up and find purpose for one another. I think that I can't overstate how important that is. And that's why you've noticed recently, we're reaching out and saying, hey, reach out to us. We're not the answer to your problem, but we might have a connection to somebody that could be the answer to your problem. If nothing else, we can be on social media together. We can email each other. We can talk to you on the phone. We can help you figure out where you're headed and know that there's other guys just like you going in that same direction.
Yeah, I love it. And you're right. That is part of the problem. And that's not just veterans. That's just anybody. If you're in need of something or you're feeling lost, you definitely can reach out within your network, join into another network, whatever it's going to be. I do want to bring some of this current Afghanistan stuff into the game, because we've seen this story play out just a few years ago when I'm going to be the one that says the political thing. Incompetent Joe Biden struggled to get out of Iraq, just like he just did with Afghanistan. And so we saw hell break loose in Iraq, which, by the way, for anybody who talked to any Iraqis, yours truly, you knew that this was going to happen. It wasn't me knowing the future. I listened to the Iraqis. And they're like, get ready. It's coming. They're going to be worse than ever before, because the people that aren't fighting you right now are just waiting. And so as an author, you guys are about to have a whole lot of potential craziness to write to, because we are, in a lot of ways, we are the great Satan. We are the one bringing all this damage and harm because we can't get our stuff together. So how does this help you guys in terms of, look, you don't want any kind of human suffering, but it's not going to stop because you guys write a book or don't write a book. It's going to keep happening. But what are your guys' thoughts? I would hate to say like the reins are off, because ISIS was horrible. ISIS continues to be horrible. Haqqani, Boko Haram, these are horrible organizations, and they provide you guys with a lot of potential ideas.
Yeah, well, for sure, the withdrawal from Afghanistan does not end the terror threat, right? And so for our guys in Sons of Valor and the Tier 1 series, there's going to be much work to do, just like there's going to be much work to do in the real world of covert operations and stuff like that. I do think that it's, as you know, Brian and I work very hard to be politically agnostic and nonpartisan, because we think it's important. We think the country's divided enough. Like, I certainly have my opinions, and you have yours, and Brian has his, and we can get into that. But all we're going to do is repeat something that's already been said by somebody else, right? And what it does is it further divides us at a time when we desperately need something that brings us together. So here's what can bring us together. We can all come together and say, you know what? No matter who you voted for, no matter who what policy you think, whatever you think would be the best way to handle this, that, or the other, we're in the best country in the world. And, my neighbor, whoever he voted for, is a hell of a lot better than the Taliban. Brian said that on an interview recently. I was like, that really resonated with me. It's like, we have come to hate our neighbors for how they vote more than we hate the Taliban. Like, that's insane, right? But what I will say in broad terms that I think everyone can relate to is there's plenty of blame to go around. All of this stuff has been built up over 4 administrations and, on both sides of the aisle. And so there's certainly plenty of blame to go around. But what I think we can all agree on as military and paramilitary and contractors and all that stuff, which we represent all of those things here, right, is this. This is what happens when the government exceeds its role in military operations. When the government says, here is a cause worth sending our sons and daughters to battle for. Here's your objective, military man. Make this happen. And he allows the subject matter experts to do what they do. The military, the intelligence community, the paramilitary organizations, they say, do what you need to do to achieve this objective. Then things usually turn out pretty well because we have an incredible intelligence community. We have an incredible military. But when the government and the political forces say, here's what we want you to do, here's the goal, here's how we want you to do it, here's when we want you to do it, we don't want you to hurt these people, but when they put a lot of rules and regulations and try to micromanage the execution of military operations when they have no background in that, this is what happens. What we're seeing now is the result of overreach by the government trying to micromanage a military that is the best in the world and can handle itself quite well and achieve objectives. And so that's about as political as we ever get. And I think it indicts everybody. It's really not about us versus them. It's about us as Americans coming together and saying, what are our goals? And then help us get them done. And let's stop fighting with each other. There's plenty of enemy out there that we can be focused on.
And I think I think that Jeff summed it up brilliantly, and I agree with everything he said. And my only 2 cents is I think there's this strange compulsion these days to, sort of let's blame the police for the criminal that commits the crime. Like don't blame the military for the Taliban's bad ideology and actions and atrocities, right? So while we were there, we're keeping the peace and law and order. We've been there 20 years. So if we had left at year 10, they would have been ready for us to leave. And year 20, they're ready for us to leave. If we had stayed another 5, they'd still be waiting and ready for us to leave. So bar exterminating, barring genocide, wiping out every single Taliban person imaginable, they're just biding their time. And so, the exit was not executed brilliantly. We all agree on that, like Jeff said. But I think we need to also remember that, the bad actors are the bad actors. They're the ones who are committing. If there was no Taliban, our exit would have left the country on an upward trajectory. They're the ones that dragged it back down, not us.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's get into the story aspect, though, because now we have Taliban saying, hey, our new franchise for terror is open here at Bagram Airfield. Come on down and we'll get you some training. We've got plenty of weapons and stuff to practice up on. That has got to open up Pandora's box in terms of stories and possibilities. I mean, for right now, the Taliban is a very wealthy army. Good luck keeping those helicopters in the air, that kind of thing. But oh my gosh, there's so many opportunities for things to cook up, and you guys can put your brains to work on that. Are you guys excited about that part of the writing process? Having this massive story engine just churning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's limitless, but I think it was before, because here's the thing. Yeah, whatever the Taliban has now monetarily, and they've got weapons they shouldn't have. We all agree on that. There's nobody out there saying we're glad they have helicopters, and we're not horrified by watching film clips where they're all walking around with SOTMOD M4s and night vision goggles and our uniforms. It's a horror show, obviously. But here's the thing that is the same while it's different, and that is it's the ideology that has been empowered more than whether they have this weapon or that. They can kill me with an AK-47. They can kill me with Bob's M4. They both wind up with me dead, and it's horrible, right? So what I worry about more than the materials and the money, which will dry up, what I worry about is the them claiming a victory, them claiming a religious victory, them saying, see, Allah was on our side. The evil Americans are gone. And what does that do for their recruitment? What does that do for their ability to extend their tentacles and facilitate the tentacles of Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram and ISIS and Haqqani and all these bad players? Are they going to be emboldened? So I'm not worried as much about what's going to happen in terms of our national security in Afghanistan. I'm worried about how will these people now be emboldened to take this battle to Europe, to try to take it back to the United States, to some of our other allied partners in the Pacific, et cetera. We've seen those terror organizations growing there already. As a writer, I know that's what you want to talk about, is how does it affect the storytelling? You're right. That's rich fodder. I would have a hard time celebrating it, I guess, because I'm an American and a military man, and I've had my own injuries, and I have brothers who have left it all on the battlefield and bled on the battlefield, and I certainly don't celebrate any of that. But from a creative standpoint, limitless opportunity for us to develop scenarios for Chunk and his boys at the Sons of Valor series, and of course Dempsey and all his angst over in the Tier 1 universe. So it's a worldwide conflict, and that certainly is good for writers. You're right about that.
Brian, have you cooked up anything good for us? Not like you guys are writing less books. You're writing more books per year. So, yes, we don't want to celebrate the atrocities and everything in Afghanistan. However, there is an airfield full of tools and toys and weapons and bad guys.
Yeah, well, I think Jeff nailed it. There's plenty of fodder there. We have a book. Sometimes we feel like we're prescient, Sons of Valor, the first book, we were sort of playing around with this idea of what happens if the enemy in what was a asymmetrically dominated battle space suddenly starts to have our technology. And now look, this is exactly what's happened, right? So we wrote that 18 months ago, and, in some scary way, it's coming true. We have a book coming out in December called Rogue Asset, where we took over the Webb Griffin Presidential Agent series. And there we moved to Africa and the Sudan, which is rich fodder for storytelling there as well, because it's a place that's full of geopolitical strife and competing ideologies and nascent paramilitary activity and stuff like that. So, we're always plumbing the depths of these opportunities, evil opportunities, I guess, for storylines.
And what's funny, Brian and I haven't even talked about this, Pete. It just occurred to me while he was talking. The second book in the Sons of Valor series comes out next June, which we're super excited about. And in that book, this was written before, the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. The whole premise of the book was taking this new generation of asymmetric jihadists, better educated, more tech savvy and all that. And the plan for us as writers had always been, how does that grow beyond the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is what you see in book one. So we already had set the stage for that exact scenario, which of course is now what we are all concerned could very well happen. And so in Sons of Valor 2, you're going to see that exact thing. Tech savvy, able to embrace Western education and technology, jihadists who are willing to move to Europe and Britain and the United States and the Pacific. So again, I don't know if we're prescient or not. I think we might just be really lucky, but it's sort of working out well for us, isn't it?
Yeah. It's funny. I've been slowly working on what was a short story, but it looks like will be a novella now of a thriller nature. And I'm no thriller writer. I just it's like me playing my guitar and singing songs and stuff. I'm just playing around with it. But one of the ideas that fascinates me, guys, is the democratization of war.
Yeah.
Anybody can do a fairly major operation with some tools that are, these are not state funded. This can be independent people that decide to attack on a multi-domain front and really cause a lot of problems, because you don't got to be all that successful. The attempt itself. You look at 9/11, not that complex. I know we want it to be complex, but really not that hard, because you have all the time in the world, and they were somewhat successful. But imagine if they'd really hit a home run. We got lucky that they kind of nubbed off a squirty double as opposed to really getting the full shot. someone someday is going to get a full shot. And now that we have even more people believing that they won, like you were saying, Jeff, it might be good recruiting time to get someone to come across the water and use our embracing of all of these people. I mean, it just writes itself, a lot of these stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you're right with, there's some technologies that are changing things too. We talked about that in Sons of Our with the big drones. You can now acquire a Predator equivalent. A Predator was something that's produced in the United States and beyond the cost, the pocketbook of your, run-of-the-mill terrorist organization. They just don't have the ability to acquire that asset. But the Chinese, wing loon pterodactyl, it's a tenth the price. Suddenly, somebody who's got a pretty good retirement savings account could buy one of those things, right? So, and that's a combat drone. You're talking about, there's some amazing things people are doing with small drones, these commercial off-the-shelf type drones, something that's sub $1,000. You can put together your own little armada of drones. You have a social media component with disinformation. Anybody can have a Twitter account or Facebook account, and the proliferation of firearms. So like you said, Pete, this democratization of war, you can put together your own fairly sophisticated organization just with the tools that are open source available, shall we say.
Yeah, it's crazy. You think about something that's designed to do something innocuous. We'll talk about drones. There are drones that are designed to fly over a non-forested space and then just do, and shoot seeds into the ground to grow trees. Hello, portable machine gun platform.
Yeah. I watched a video the other day of this drone that's been built for these extreme sports guys. Yeah. And the whole goal of this drone is to follow you, and it uses AI. Yeah. And the video on the website is they're on their mountain bikes and they're cruising through these canyons and stuff, doing these jumps, going through trees and stuff. And the drone's like, following them with perfect precision. And, the company's like, how great is this? It can follow you as you wingsuit down and ride your bike and do whatever. And I'm thinking, this is terrifying. You can't lose the drone. And it's all AI. And this is again, off the shelf technology, right?
Yeah, there's the ultimate suicide bomber now, right? You can't get away from it even on your bike. You're running down the road and it's going and making every single turn with you. Even think about Amazon now using drones to deliver packages. Yeah. That package doesn't have to be a pair of flip-flops. That package could be package could be a bomb, right? And so the sick people like us in the world, that's what we think of. We see that technology and we think, hey, I'm putting this in a story. But there's some people even sicker than us who are saying, I'm going to build that bomb, right? So, yeah, it's terrifying. It's really
my dad said to me the other day, he said, don't you worry about the fact that you guys come up with these ideas and you put them in your books and you're going to give the bad guys ideas. And I said, you know what? Maybe in the beginning, the thought crossed our mind, but then we realized if we thought of it, other people can think of it. And in fact, it's probably better that we do put it in our books so that we can get the consciousness starting to think about, okay, this could happen. How do we prevent it from happening? We'd rather people be aware of the potential malevolence than pretend it doesn't exist.
You think about what does it take to destabilize the U.S.? And I would say we're definitely less stable now than we were 20 years ago. And maybe that's some Regency bias, whatever. But if I was to plan, and I thought about I would love to do a series of shows and grab you guys and some, special operators and be like, what's the most terrifying thing you can think of that's completely plausible? And just start telling those stories on the show. And it's not hard to, again, do very small things that aren't even designed to do anything. Imagine, guys, if you can, if you had enough people, and it's not very many people, and you just went and left an oily bag at every major airport in the United States over the course of 10 days. Just an oily bag. They would freak out, and you'd be like, what is going on? Remember how badly we freaked out about the clown thing? And everybody's like, there's clowns everywhere. It was just a bunch of hoaxes. And it freaked people out. No, you don't understand. They were killing people. Were they? Were they really? I mean, in any kind of significant way, no. It was just people wore clown costumes and it became something, and people lost their damn minds over clowns.
right? Yeah, that would be an awesome show. Count us in. That would be, first of all, we're pirating ideas for books, but secondly, your listeners would love that. Like and like Brian said, we don't worry really. We've had this conversation. We don't worry about giving bad guys ideas.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves that we're getting good ideas into the consciousness, and people will learn how to defend themselves. The government and agencies will learn perhaps, oh, I didn't think about that. Let's make sure we can defend against that. So that would be a really good show, dude. You should totally do it.
Yeah, do a whole series of it. Like, what's the most terrifying plausible thing that can happen right now? Yeah, and you're right. The conversation is important, because if we don't have them, who is going to have them? Well, the bad guys are going to be the only ones having them. And institutions don't move fast enough. That's why they hired guys like you guys. Do you recall before the Munich massacre at the Olympics? They had a threat analysis guy, and he's like, you could have some Palestinians who kidnap some Israelis, and like he exactly predicted the operation, and it's so crazy that these things exist. Let's talk a little bit about Webb Griffin and what you guys are doing, what you got coming up next.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
No, I kind of already gave a little primer on it. But, everyone who's been a thriller reader knows about Webb Griffin. I mean, he's written 50, 60 novels, just an iconic, sort of groundbreaking author in the space. Passed away, I think, a year and a half ago now. And one of his most famous and interesting series was The Presidential Agent, which follows Charlie Castile. And he's sort of kind of like a lone wolf guy with his occasional team who goes out and takes on the most impossible problems ordered directly from the President of the United States. As you can tell when you hear that description, it sounds right up Anders and Wilson's alley, which is, I think, why Tom Colvin over at Putnam tapped us to take the reins. And we're so excited because we get to write Charlie Castile, but we also, have a time gap in the series. So it's been 8 years since the last book in real life. And it's been 8 years in time since in our fictional universe where Charlie strapped a drop holster on. So I'll pass the reins back to Jeff so he can tell you a little bit more about it. But that's where we pick up with Charlie is 8 years later.
And that was cool because it made it easier for us. I will tell you, if you have to write the next story that picks up, 2 days later, that's a lot of challenge. But because there's some time gap, 8 years, there's a new, one or two new presidencies have occurred and the geopolitics have changed. Castile in our world has retired, but is called out of retirement to bring the presidential agent program back. But what it gave us was an opportunity to introduce some new characters into the series, right? So, Charlie has got a lot of fight left in him for sure. Any fans of him don't need to worry. He's in the fight. But let's be honest, he's getting a little long in the tooth, right? I mean, he's got to be pushing 60 years old, and he's not going to be the guy that's, doing all this stuff by himself. And so we have this idea that he's training the next generation of presidential agents. So we had the opportunity to introduce a brand new character. It's so funny. We got through our social media, something came to us just today, this morning, that says, I love the Navy SEALs, but why is it always a Navy SEAL? Where are your Marines? Where's the MARSOC guys? And I was able to reply, we've got one for you. So our new presidential agent in training under the mentorship of Charlie is a Marine Raider, and he's our reluctant hero. He's doing his stuff in the war on terror. He has no interest whatsoever at being plucked out from his team and going and being one of the Smiths or Jones. You've been out there, Pete. You know how it is. Those guys come, you're like, I don't want to even talk to those guys, much less be one of those guys. And so here he is, at the order of the president, requested to give his service and learn a whole new universe. So that was really cool. We've got the new cast of characters as well as the original characters that we can exemplify in this book. Really, really, really fun. It was a little daunting without that 8-year gap. Not sure we emotionally could have handled the pressure of trying to write Webb Griffin. But I will say, I got to give a shout out to Tom Colgan, our editor at Putnam. The best thing he did for us was early on, when he saw us ruminating about, the pressure of writing in the iconic Webb Griffin space, he said, listen, guys, we didn't hire you to write Webb Griffin. No one can do that. There's only one, and he writes the way he writes. You do not need to be trying to replicate anything. What you need to do, what we are asking you to do, is you write the best Andrews and Wilson novel that honors the Webb Griffin series, that pays homage to him, and brings his characters back to life in your own voice. Once he told us that, I was like, all right, that we can do. That we can definitely do. So we're really excited to see what people think, because we think we did a good job with it.
Oh, I know you guys did a good job. Come on. There's no way. So that book is done and we're coming out in December. Is that right? Or are you guys not quite done?
Yeah. It's done and ready to go.
Let me ask you, and I want to ask this carefully because I don't want to be too prying, but you guys have your own successful brand, Andrews and Wilson, and now you're writing Webb Griffin. It must be worth your while to write for Webb Griffin, because otherwise you would just write another Andrews and Wilson book, right? So is it better for the Andrews and Wilson brand that you guys do this, or is this more fun, or is this stability and payday? How do you guys describe this choice to write for somebody else? Because you guys definitely have your own stuff. I know you could just cook up another universe like right now, So what makes you want to do this when you have such a successful brand already?
I mean, I think it's a multifaceted question. First, I mean, it's sort of like somebody drives up in your driveway and they pull in and there's a, pick your favorite sports car, a Tesla or Lamborghini or whatever. And they're like, hey, do you want to take this thing on a spin around the block? Yes. It'd be hard to not look at it and be like, yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, a little bit of excitement and, kid in a candy store sort of wide-eyed approach to, hey, they're giving us a chance to write this series, write this character. And that's kind of hard to pass up, I would say, number one. Number two, I mean, like Jeff said, Tom Colgan is the guy who, discovered and sort of managed Tom Clancy's career. So, I mean, how could you not want to work with somebody who is that talented, that plugged into the universe, Tom Clancy's former editor? I mean, that's kind of hard to walk away from as well. And then I think the third thing is, for us, our brand has been primarily in the audio and digital spaces. And we just wanted this opportunity to have discovery for more readers. I mean, Webb Griffin books are in the airports and the Costco's and the like. So, it's great if we can introduce a whole new, group of readers to, hey, you love Webb Griffin. Let's see if you like what we've done with the series. But, when you get in this book, check out some of our other stuff, the Tier 1, the Sons of Hour, the Dark Intercept, and see what you think.
I love it. And then what about, you guys can do anything you want, it seems like. So why not go out and approach Stephen J. Cannell's people and start writing Stephen books? Because he's not written one since he passed. And that brand is just sitting there fallow, waiting for you guys to go start your own LA crime novel.
That would be a lot of fun. That would be awesome. But the reality is, it turns out there is only so much room in the Andrews and Wilson bucket.
What? That's not true.
We do have an announcement coming up soon about something new coming in 2023. And honestly, that may just cap our ability to, we're having to write a book about every 3 months right now. And that's, even with two of us, that's getting tough. And then the other thing that we can also tell your listeners is that the Dark Intercept book and the Shepherd series has been optioned for television. And so that's going to be keeping us busy as well. So at some point, our wives and kids leave us if we don't have something left over for them on the weekend. So the reality is there's only so many hours in a day, and we might be creeping up on our limit.
But Pete, if you want to approach them, we are happy to support and endorse you taking over the series, and we'll even provide a writing tip or two along the way.
So it'll be Stephen J. Cannell under the banner of Andrews and Wilson, written by Pete Turner, on the inside of the first cover.
Yes.
It'll be out of room.
Yes. It's like a drop-down menu of
It'll be a fold out. Yeah. Well, everybody should get Dark Intercept. You guys know Brian, you know Jeff, you guys know what they're doing, and they write great books. That's why we keep having them on. Plus, they're good dudes. So support the good dudes. The links will be in the show notes. Just look in this post here if you're watching on the live side, and you'll see the link in there for Dark Intercept. Another book coming out in a couple of months, which means they're going to be back in a couple of months talking about their Webb Griffin book. And as much as you guys work writing them, it's a lot of work to keep up, with you guys, which is great. I mean, I love it. I love sitting on my rower and listening to books from my friends that they write them. I just think it's the best thing. Anything in closing, Brian and or Jeff?
Yeah. First of all, please come to our website and sign up for our mailing list. We don't spam, but it's a great way to just stay up to date on our news and new releases. And also there's special deals and stuff like that. And then please, if you haven't already, follow us on social media. Our Instagram account is Andrews and Wilson, or B Andrews J Wilson on Twitter. It's just another way for us to stay in touch.
It's getting harder and harder to do it because we have so many moving parts now. So that's why we're encouraging people to try to follow us and get the information that way. And of course, always glad to be on your show, Pete, and help get the word out that way. Thanks so much, brother. We really appreciate it.